And welcome in to another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network. I'm Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who every time he posts a link to one of his stories, he thinks to himself, "Are you not entertained?" He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Doing good, Kieran. Can't say I actually do that. I did go ahead and join Blue Sky somewhat against my will. I think all social media is just dumb, but I have to do it. Like Twitter, here's this thing that ruined the journalism industry. It's dying. Oh, let's replace it. What could go wrong? So I protested for like 3 days. I'm on there. We'll see if it sticks. But give me a follow on Blue Sky. And if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, because who are we kidding? We love social media. We're on all of it. If you could go ahead and click that subscribe button right below the video, that would help us out a ton.
Yep, subscribe, notifications, so you always get our latest episodes, and of course, wherever you get your podcast. I am currently not on Blue Sky. I feel like that sounds like a statement. It's not. I just don't have the energy to try to figure out another social media thing right now. So maybe
Probably a good choice.
I'm not, a rebel. So if that's where everybody is, eventually I will be there. So there you go. That's my Blue Sky take real quick.
And here's the thing. Once everybody is there, it's going to be terrible. So that
you can bank that, just like guys being in the best shape of their lives in February, and the most important election is the next one, right? So we got all of it covered here. All right. Speaking of voting, so we have a couple of awards to get to involving your Detroit Tigers. I want to start with the one that the Tiger personnel did not win, because he is a friend of the podcast and a recent guest. And if you missed our AJ Hinch interview, you can go to said, podcast services, wherever you get your podcasts, and YouTube, and watch/listen to us talk to AJ. We talked to him right after he was announced as a finalist. He did not win Manager of the Year. That was Stephen Vogt in Cleveland. AJ actually third. So my first instinct when I saw the vote was, this is kind of what I predicted, like a little bit. We talked about it, about how no one really everybody had a good case. Everybody had a good case, and AJ's looks a lot better with the postseason. Obviously, voting happens before that. So one of those things that feels a little bit like uneven, but at the same time, it's not like Steven didn't deserve it. It's not like Q didn't deserve to be second or even win it. So we finally get the reveal. Cody, you are a voter for this award, and obviously you know these managers pretty well, having covered them in division, since they've been skipping the Royals and the Guardians respectively, and obviously AJ. So first of all, who'd you vote for, and just kind of take us through your process, because like I said, there wasn't a bad choice here, which in a way makes it a tough choice, because that's a big responsibility you have there.
Yeah, well, you guys may have noticed there was one first place vote for AJ Hinch, and that was your boy. I wrestled with this a lot. Largely, I worried this exact scenario. What if I'm the only one who votes AJ number one? Are people going to flood my many social media accounts? Like, what are you doing? Why are you carrying water for this cheater? I was afraid of that. Almost didn't vote for him because of it. And I think leading up the final 2 weeks of the season, I figured I would probably vote for Stephen Vogt. And then the Tigers pulled off the improbable, and it was like, you just can't deny this. And the more I thought about it, this award, as we've talked about, no actual statistics, no real criteria. It's like, I don't think the Tigers do this without AJ Hinch. I'm not sure I've watched a lot of baseball. I'm not sure I've ever seen a manager impact the outcome on the field day in and day out the way AJ Hinch did down the stretch this season. I saw a couple comments that like, well, it's not a last 2 months award, it's a full season award, and they won the same amount of games as the Royals. Like, what are we like? That is the full season. So just the more I thought about it, I kind of asked myself, if this vote were private and the world would never know, who would I vote for? And I was like, I would vote for AJ Hinch, because I watched this team every single day. I just am not sure they could have done it with anyone else making those decisions in the dugout. And again, these other two guys had incredibly compelling cases. the thing that surprised me the most is that the vote was not closer. I thought Quatraro would have a tremendous chance to win the award, and I thought he would be neck and neck with Stephen Vogt. As I said, I kind of expected AJ probably to finish third. Even though I voted him first, just because like I think that narrative was set earlier in the year that like, oh, it's Q or it's Vogt. And I think that just skews again this award where you can't just look at anything that objectively tells you who should win it. Like I think that skewed some things in the minds of voters. It did end up somewhat surprised no one else voted for AJ Hinch, but yeah, I thought it would be close. Stephen Vogt ends up winning it, somewhat running away, and you know what? Definitely well deserved. First year as a manager, a team that, although I think on paper a little more talented than the Tigers. I mean, you got Jose Ramirez in that lineup. It doesn't scare anyone on paper, but they play a really tough style of baseball. They had some pitching issues of their own, and Vogt managed that extremely well down the stretch of the season. And hey, the votes are cast before the playoffs, but maybe if there's any indicator, the Guardians advance further than the Tigers or the Royals.
That's true. I mean, you get the end results on your side there, and the because I was kind of anticipating like what I would say should AJ win, or even like a close second or whatever. And I guess in a way I can still kind of say those things where we're in the Tiger territory, like pretty like a lot. So it's hard to gauge like the actual like national narrative stuff. So something like this gives us at least like some idea in some way. And I like that you mentioned like people in your mentions like saying, bringing up the cheater stuff or whatever, because had he won this, like, could this been another step toward putting that way behind him national narrative wise? Maybe we won't know. You could argue the success should already do that, but winning the award is winning the award. So I'll be curious to see any more fallout about whether that is even brought up in the conversation. And honestly, now the Tigers are more relevant than ever. Like, this is something we're just going to have to monitor moving forward, about like how much is that now that he's not in Siberia, baseball Siberia in a way, like how much that kind of gets brought up, or is, I don't want to say brought up, but still attached to him, because this would have been a nice way to like really, really look forward and not have to have that stigma.
Yeah, it does make you wonder if that influenced anyone out there's vote. I will also say that I think one big takeaway, no one really cares about manager of the year. Like, I haven't actually got that hate on my social media, really. I haven't heard much of anything. Maybe that'll change if like this video clip catches on, but it's been pretty quiet, and there's some people out there saying Hinch got snubbed. There's some people out there saying Quatraro got snubbed, but no one's really getting worked up about manager of the year.
What about, I'm not Tigers related. We'll get to the other one here in a second, but real quick, what about rookie of the year? So Paul Skeens and Luis Gil win that, and that's pitchers, Pirates, and Yankees respectfully. You also have a vote for that. We didn't tease this at all because obviously not a Tigers connection, but obviously an award that is hugely important to somebody's resume. You got to take it seriously. Obviously you do. Where'd you kind of align on those?
Yeah, I can feel confident I'm not a homer because Colt Keith was nowhere near my AL Rookie of the Year ballot. And I think he's a good player with a bright future, but he just didn't really measure up to the other candidates out there. Luis Gil wins it. I voted Colton Cowser number one. Again, it was a little bit of a tough decision. There wasn't like a clear-cut favorite. Gil had a nice resume, but when I look closer at what he did in the second half, I believe his ERA was over 4. The couple times I had watched him, I wasn't overly impressed. He had some really dominant starts early on and kind of tapered off. Again, I think there was maybe some big market bias there. Cowser, I mean, you could argue like Wyatt Langford's final month made him like just as productive as Cowser, but the WAR systems love Cowser. That's not an end-all, be-all for my vote, but it's definitely where I start. And he played a lot. He played a lot for a good team. He impacted the game. But third, I did do something a little different than most voters. I had Cade Smith from the Guardians at number 3, which if you watched him pitch in the postseason, I felt very validated every time he shoved against the Tigers or the Yankees or whoever it might be. He had a very big workload for a relief pitcher. And again, I think if he weren't a reliever, if he weren't in Cleveland, he would have gotten more attention, more votes. Actually, Evan Woodbury of M Live was the lone person to vote Cade Smith first, which was interesting. I voted him third, not first, but I think he was certainly deserving. And so, yeah, that means no Wyatt Langford on my ballot, no Wilyer Abreu, no Austin Wells on my ballot. All tough decisions, but I ended up feeling good with Cowser, and it was a close vote, but I still kind of think Cowser should have won it.
Yeah, like in terms of who do I have anxiety going up against, Cowser is one for me among these, candidates. And then Smith is two. And just because, I'm always going to fear a hitter more than a pitcher, but Smith, whenever he came in, man, it's not like you could ever really be confident. I think he's got a really bright future. Obviously, all these guys potentially do, obviously, but Cowser isn't he the one from Sam Houston State? If I'm going back in my draft memory, let's see if we can get
I am not sure. We'll have to get someone on that one.
Yeah, get someone on that one real quick. But yeah, so another example too.
Sam Houston State, you're right.
Bam. So like another
shout out Huntsville.
Yeah, shout out. Another example too of like it would have made more sense had he the Orioles did anything in the postseason. Didn't happen. That's how it goes. Doesn't diminish his season, obviously. All right, the big one, but also the easiest to predict. Tarik Skubal is your American League Cy Young winner. And like we've known this for a while. I feel like it's been pretty safe for a while. I even go back to when I was in Detroit, Cody, for NFL draft weekend. Obviously went to several Tigers games, and I tried to bet on Tarik Skubal to win the Cy Young. By that point, the odds were like not even like fun. Like it's like the return, the ROI just isn't good. And he entered the season, I believe, number 2 in Cy Young like probability. So when I look back at this season for Skubal, which was obviously special, which was obviously legendary, the thing that I'm going to remember most is the like relief and elation of somebody that you believe can reach a certain level, and then seeing them actually reach it, and then really not like we talk about development being linear, like the linear, like or not linear. This was kind of not linear, but only because it was at the top. Like it was kind of a flat line. It was a plateau the entire season, really. And so like the expectations being put on a team and a guy and then being matched and exceeded in a time of Tigers baseball that you don't really get to experience all that often. That's what I'll kind of remember the most, is just like the confidence he can do it, and then making me look like a genius that he actually did it. You know what I mean? And being able to like brag to my friends like, "Oh, Skubal's on the mound. You better watch this," or you ain't got no shot today. And also he kind of brought back the wins, stat a little bit to brag about, since he won the Triple Crown, and it aligned with everything else, and even the team's record in his starts, even if he didn't physically get the win. So that's what I'll remember, just like dominance from start to finish, and the not having to brace for disappointment given the high expectations placed upon him. So that's kind of what I remember. But from your perspective, you've talked to him after almost all these starts, and you see him almost every day. Like you witness history. So like, what do you kind of reflect on with Skubal's 2024 season?
I still almost think we like take for granted how quickly he came back from surgery and was just the best pitcher in baseball. From the first time I saw Tarik Skubal throw with my own eyes, which was, I believe, spring 2020, I was like, oh, this kid's real. Like, and I believed in him and his ceiling. We've gone back and forth on a lot of players in our time doing this podcast. We've been right about some, wrong about others. He was one guy I never really doubted, but still the amount of improvements he made from then and even from 2022 to now is kind of startling. He went from being a fly ball pitcher to a ground ball pitcher. He basically, he didn't have a great changeup. Then he started throwing a splitter. Now he has maybe the best changeup of any starting pitcher in the league. He went from being a little erratic, not very pitch efficient, to the single best strike thrower in the American League. 68.7% first pitch strikes, I think. Like, that's nuts. Like, I think how quickly he made that jump is still kind of astounding to think about. And yeah, the level, look, you look at the history of Cy Young seasons, it wasn't the most dominant ever, but it certainly felt like it at times. He just carved hitters and had hitters looking uncomfortable every single start, like I have rarely seen before. I mean, I think the most impressive pitching performance I've really seen with my own eyes was Jake Arrieta at the start of the 16 season. He was setting records for how good he had been from 15 into 16. And I would put Skubal a pretty close number 2 in terms of ability to just carve. Wrote another story about Tarik that's up on The Athletic. Hope you guys will check it out. Kind of talking to his teammates about his Cy Young season and kind of just their view of Skubal. I think the things that stand out is just kind of the respect they have for him, his toughness, his routine, his work ethic. Those are things you hear a lot about. But, I think maybe the most interesting thing I learned is I just kind of asked a couple guys, like, what's he like on a start day? Because you hear these tales of Verlander and Clayton Kershaw and all these other guys just being like, you don't come within 30 feet of that guy, don't look at him, don't talk to him. Like, you can't do it. These alpha males are so locked in and intense. And turns out Skubal's not really like that. Like, they say he's approachable, he's funny, he's normal on a start day. He has his routines, his crossword puzzle and his fruit snacks, and like he's very diligent about each step of the work. But Bo Brisky was basically like, it probably doesn't really do any good to exhaust yourself before the game even starts. So that's kind of an interesting way to just get some insight into the Skubal mentality. And obviously, we all know once he steps on the mound, he's as competitive as they come. But just to hear that he's like not this otherworldly person on the day of the start, I thought was really interesting and maybe even serves him well.
Yeah, and obviously pales in comparison to the Cy Young, but the fact that he was an all-star this year and kind of like represented the team along with Riley Green, obviously, like, at the midsummer class at a time when it's not like vibes were great with the franchise, you know what I mean? So like that will also like come to mind, especially me specifically, because the game happened in my backyard, right over in Arlington. So like it feels, if like we talk about Torque, we talk about it from a disappointment angle, right? And Riley Green, like we're still like anticipating a ceiling for him, and obviously these are different cases, but I'm just talking about like all these top prospects that you were banking on. Here's one that like hit. You know what I mean? Cy Young, and a guy that you want to, in theory, we're not going to talk about extensions right now, but in theory, you want sort of like being the face of your franchise for several years to come. So I also, again, I know this has nothing to do with the voting, but in terms of how I'll remember this season, the postseason is definitely part of it, right? So I actually went back and looked at Verlander's first several starts in the postseason for the Tigers. And it's not an apples to apples because obviously he was 23 years old and a rookie in the 2006 run. And then in 2011, he had established himself and he was age 28 season. So that's a little bit easier. But then again, it wasn't his first postseason. Not apples to apples. I understand that. But I thought it was interesting. So obviously Skubal, I just wrote down earned runs and walks. Like just like a simple little look at it. I didn't want to go like too deep. Skubal 0-0-0-0 first 2 postseason starts, and then obviously he gives up the 5 runs in the decisive Game 5, where basically the dam just broke on the team in general, and that's postseason baseball. That's why you love it. 1 walk in that game as well. So Verlander. Because I don't know how many people like remember this. There was a time where you were kind of uneasy about him in the postseason. And so in 2006, again, rookie year, he's 23 years old. These are his starts, earned runs to walks. 3-4, 4-1, 6-2, 3-4. Now let's go to 2011, his MVP Cy Young season. 4-3, 3-2, 4-3. And then the next year is when he has that dominant performance against the Athletics. And then like the Tide, like the narrative really shifts then. But that's also part of the Skubal story for me, is that he had this explosive, dominating regular season and then carried it over into the postseason when the eyes are obviously more on you. The pressure is amped. I was at that game in Houston. Like that was you guys are a cute story. We respect Skubal, but we still expect to win this and not really be challenged all that much. That's a situation that somebody lesser could have imploded. And even the first game he pitched in Cleveland against Cleveland as well. So that's part of the story for me, and especially comparing to how Verlander started, because he's now in the Verlander class, obviously. Like that gives you an idea of how dominant he was this year.
Absolutely.
So we will go on to the last award that has been divvied out recently, and it's very local. It is one that obviously people like Cody care about more, but I think it is still interesting for the fans. Matt Vierling wins the Detroit chapter BBWAA Good Guy Award, Professionalism Award. You can describe this better now, but basically, who is a good guy around and dealing with the media, which you guys are there, like I said, for a game, after the game, most every day. Like if people get tired of each other, it'd be the most natural thing on the planet, right? So take us through this vote and what made Matt such a deserving candidate.
Yeah, this is the I believe it's the Dan Ewald Award. He was a former Tigers PR director back in the day. This award has not been given out for many years. It was kind of brought back and resurrected this season. So kudos to Matt Vierling for not the inaugural award, but in a way, like the first of this generation, certainly. Another tough decision when I sat down and thought about it. We were told to submit 2 names, and I was like, well, one good thing about covering this team, there's no real like assholes. Like almost everyone is pretty good to deal with. A couple guys that weren't there at the end of the season. So, but like I could have written a lot of names for this one. I thought about Tarik Skubal and all the attention he got, and just how he still handled it and was accessible. And Riley Green and Torque, who we've talked about and had to criticize at times, and all those guys had cases, but I think the 2 that really stood out were Matt Vierling and Jake Rogers in terms of being friendly, being quotable, being able to just have kind of a side conversation off the record with, and generally being consistently available. You're right. It gets hard. I try to be cognizant of this, with the players. It gets hard when the media is coming to you every single day. Like I try to kind of space it out most of the time, especially like before a game. And on a team with a lot of young players, Vierling, who is still young himself, kind of had to assume more of a veteran role, both with his teammates and with the media. He was the guy after games, good and bad, usually standing there in front of the cameras, in front of the microphones, answering the questions. And he was professional in times good and bad, whether it was June or whether it was September. I think he's done a lot for the culture of this clubhouse and kind of has grown into a leadership role, even if, he may not view himself that way. So, yeah, definitely congratulations to Matt Vierling, and Jake Rogers finished second and was a very deserving candidate as well.
Yeah, and 2 guys that you always even take away like the stuff in the clubhouse. 2 guys, and they're not the only ones, obviously, but 2 guys that you could see that just in the way that they interact on the field, right? Like it's not a surprise that they would handle that way. Right. And Vierling's an interesting case study. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it this offseason, but the last remnants of the Gregory Soto deal, and this is a guy that was batting 3rd in your lineup and deciding playoff games, right? So, like, you could probably say that's not ideal, but he was, and he was trusted for a variety of reasons, and being the spokesperson for the team is definitely something that is part of the overall picture. So that's why I wanted to point it out, because I think it speaks to so many other things. So,
sure.
All right, let's get to some of the nitty gritty stuff. We had ourselves this week, Cody, a 40-man deadline, Rule 5 protection deadline, and By the way, that's going to be in my backyard too, and you're going to be here, so that's the Rule 5 draft, right? That's going to be
draft. Nothing gets me hyped like the Rule 5 draft, baby.
I'm going to be live tweeting it from the hotel in Dallas. So the Tigers opted to protect 3 pitchers. That's Chase Lee, Tyler Matheson, and Tyler Owens. Now, if you don't necessarily follow the minors all that well, but you remember like a couple of those names from the summer, that would be because Chase Lee came over from the Rangers in the Andrew Chafin deal, and Tyler Owens came over from the Rangers in the Carson Kelly deal. I had to make sure I got those right, which deal was which there. And Matheson was a 4th-round pick a couple of years ago as well. So those are 3 pitchers. Those are 3 probably relief pitchers. I'm just going to go by Baseball Reference real quick. Matheson is listed as a pitcher. The other 2 are listed as relief pitchers. Forever that's worth. So, but it's not on the surface. I'm not going to try to give scouting reports to these guys. On the surface, it doesn't surprise me that they would opt to protect 3 arms that they, in some way, recently have shown a likeness for. So
yeah, not at all. Lee and Owens, I definitely expected to be protected. Guys they obviously liked because they traded for them. Guys who are now upper level prospects and could be knocking on the door of the big leagues next season. Both do some things. I love this line about Chase Lee from Jason Beck of MLB.com. A reliever named Chase is going to grab attention. And he struck out more than 12 batters per 9 innings over his minor league career. He's got a little bit of a sidearm delivery and cut his walk rate recently. Owens, he was a later round pick, 13th round, but he's upped his fastball. He has a well-rounded arsenal. He was pretty good for Erie coming out of the bullpen. Now, I think Madison is the interesting one. Tyler Madison, I remember when he was drafted, the Tigers liked him a lot, but he had surgery on his arm. He's not healthy right now. So why would you protect a player who's not healthy? Somewhat interesting, raises an eyebrow a little bit, but that's a sign the Tigers like him and really don't want to lose him. You could almost argue, like, why would another team draft a player who's not healthy? I don't know. Like, that almost could allow an opposing club to stash a guy like that in their organization until he is healthy. So I can kind of see it. It surprised me, but I can see the logic there. In terms of guys who were not protected, Justice Bigby is probably the biggest name. He was obviously on the rise. Kind of this time last year, but really struggled in AAA, especially being a hitter who's probably a minus outfielder and going to maybe play some first. Like, I don't think the Tigers are going to be overly worried about losing him. And also a guy who's, he just struggled in AAA. Like, he's going to have a big year to get himself kind of back on the radar. I think Joseph Montalvo was the most interesting one, another guy who came over from the Rangers at the trade deadline, and I think probably has the highest ceiling of all those pitchers they acquired around that time. A little curious why they didn't protect him, but he's 22. He hasn't pitched above high A. Seems like a little bit of a gamble that no other team will view him as major league ready. Lyle Lockhart, an interesting one. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some teams that are going to be scouting Lyle Lockhart hard. He was in AAA. He had to be a candidate to get a look at some point in August or September. It didn't happen, but a guy who's really improved in his time throughout the system, kind of a borderline candidate to be protected. But ultimately, I see why they wouldn't, but I'm curious if anyone might give him a look in the Rule 5 draft.
Yeah, so just to tie a bow on it, Lee is 26, Madison is 25, and Owens is 24. So they're
all somewhat older. That kind of tells you, yeah.
And a lot of them are recent birthdays too. So they're on obviously the younger end of that age.
Yeah, I think maybe the Tigers had to kick 3 guys off the roster to protect these guys. So Brendan White no longer on the 40-man, Eddie Leonard no longer on the 40-man, and Ricky Vanasco no longer on the 40-man. I think Leonard is the most surprising or interesting, at least, of those. I was a little surprised. I figured, traded for at the deadline 2 years ago, did some really nice things, hits the ball really hard. You think the Tigers, still like him, could use some infield bats in their system. But ultimately, I'm not surprised he was let go, if that makes any sense, because He's not a great defender. He's not really a shortstop. And you look closer at his hitting numbers, and there are some big concerns. A 36.1% chase rate. That is rough. A 31.3% whiff rate. For just some comparison's sake, Javier Baez whiffed at a 30.2% whiff. So you're talking Javi level chase, Javi level whiff, if not worse. Struck out 26% of the time. Does not play Javi level defense. Still, I think some upside in the bat, but walked only 6% of the time. Like there's some major plate discipline and contact issues. And that's why we never saw him in the big leagues this year, in addition to the defense component, and why he was ultimately removed from the 40-man roster. So a saying for writers is you have to be able to kill your darlings. Sometimes you got to kill off the spring training darlings as a fan. He was one of those not too long ago. A little bit of a reminder that spring training is often fool's gold.
Fool's gold, and you just never know what a season's going to entail. I mean, if you said Javi got hurt and missed, however many games he missed, you're probably thinking, all right, we got a pretty good idea about Leonard, right? No, didn't even enter into the realm of possibility. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with those guys, and then how the Rule 5 draft goes. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it at the time, I'm sure. Scott Harris and the brass there already have an idea of some guys they might want to look at, and we will react to it when that comes, just in about a month. So not too far away. Anything else, Cody, before we jet out of here?
No, that's all I got.
Award and star-studded podcast today. A lot of fun. It's cool to talk about the Tigers in this capacity. It's just another example of the steps that this franchise has taken, and wear your Tigers hat with pride. Tarik Skubal is a Cy Young winner. AJ Hinch was a finalist for Manager of the Year. Very well could have won that award. So be sure, as we said at the beginning, be sure to be following us on the social medias, and Cody at Blue Sky, and YouTube. Subscribe and notification bell, so you know exactly when that goes up. We're going to try to grow that, have that humming by the time spring training rolls around. And, of course, wherever you get your podcasts, you can follow Cody on X, if you're still on there, at Cody Stavenhagen. I am at Kieran_Steckley. The pod page is at Tiger Territory _. So, for Cody Stavenhagen, I am Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great day.